Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Rudomin, and today we are continuing with our study of the book of Genesis, in Hebrew Bereshit, and today's topic will be Genesis chapter 9, and I hope you'll be able to join me with a Hebrew text or an English text, and you can, or whatever language you understand or read, get that ready, Genesis chapter 9, and we can enjoy the chapter together. Before I start, as I usually do, I'd like to just discuss a couple of general points as a orientation to study of the Chumash, which is what we do. The Chumash means the 5 books of Moses. It's another name for the Torah. And the first concept I'd like to describe, because it comes up in chapter 9, and we've already come across it, and that's the topic of be fruitful and multiply. In Hebrew, it's called pru urevu. Pru from the word like peirot, fruits, and revu means plentiful. So in the Hebrew, it's reversed. It's fruitful. Well, not really reversed, but it's fruitful and multiply. Fruitful and multiply. And this concept is important because besides the commandment that was given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but they were commanded to be fruitful and multiply and fill the world. So it's a commandment, it's a mitzvah, it's a good deed, it's meritorious. It's what people are supposed to do to create other people. And it's a very high thing because by creating another person, you become a partner with God, because the mother and father contribute the body, and God contributes the life, the soul. So being fruitful and multiplying is an important commandment that we see from the time of Adam. And again, when God starts his creation again, so to speak, with Noah after the flood, he again commands him to be fruitful and multiply. And we'll see this notion again with the children of Israel in Egypt, that they were very fruitful and multiplied. So it's nothing to be alarmed about. You know, modern man and very scientific people are afraid of a population explosion, that there'll be too many people on Earth, and that the Earth won't be able to sustain, billions of people. Well, so far, we've gone from, just a handful to a few million. And now as we start the 21st century, humanity is up to about 7.5 billion people. And there's lots of room on planet Earth. There really is. And there's lots of abundance. There's lots of, if man would only focus his energies and his time on positive things like feeding humanity and building up the world instead of destruction and wars, man would be in a far better place. And so therefore there is lots of room for more people, and there are lots of resources, and we are following God's command by populating the world with more and more people, not less and less. How much can we take? We'll see. As I said in another video, time does not last forever. God has structured the time and the world as such to end after 6,000 years. So we're in the late 5,000s, and we'll take it from there. It's not our job to play God. It's God's job to be God, and it's our job to be humans. And as humans, we need to be fruitful and multiply. Okay, that's an important foundation. The other point I'd like to touch upon is this notion of Tselem Elokim, that man was created in the image of God, that particularly the soul of man, the spirit of man, is created in the image of God, and even physically, the physical dimensions of a human being are very much somehow based on an image of God. But that a human being is a holy creature, not just another animal, like a Homo sapien, high on the order of evolution. No, that's not the Torah outlook. I remember once hearing, we had a biology teacher in the school I went to. It was not a very religious school, and they played us a song about Jiminy Cricket from Walt Disney, and explaining different things about biology, and the theme song would be, "You are a human animal." And I remember the tune, "You are a human animal." So that's not true. That's not a Torah outlook to say that a human being is a human animal. We're not a human animal. On the contrary, we are at Tselem Elokim. We are created in the image of God. That's what the Torah says, and that's the way to look at human beings. And that's why murdering another person or even committing suicide, as hopefully we'll see in this chapter, is a great sin, because it mars, it damages, it impinges upon, it destroys the image of God, the Tselem Elokim. Tselem means an image, and Elokim, actually it's Elohim. I'm just saying it Elokim because you're not supposed to pronounce God's name, but the Hebrew pronunciation is Tselem Elohim, the image of God. Elohim means the Lord, the image of the Lord. So man is created in the image of the Lord. So that's the second point, general point I'm touching upon. Now, my next point that I'd like to mention is that the Tikkun HaChet of Adam. Adam committed a sin by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's then humanity's job to rectify. Tikkun HaChet. I mean, this phrase has been taken over in a certain way by modern people when they talk about Tikkun Olam. Well, what is Tikkun Olam? What is perfecting the world? Tikkun, letaken, means to fix. So what is the fixing of the world? So Tikkun Olam means perfecting the world, and according to a Torah outlook, it means perfecting the sin that of Adam and Eve. They brought death into the world. They brought suffering into the world. Death and suffering was something extraneous to mankind, was outside on this thing called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve internalized and brought into the world evil, meaning, and death and suffering and all these negative things. So Noah's job was to perfect the tikkun, was to do the tikkun of Adam and Eve, and of all subsequent generations were supposed to do that, but they failed. As we said, there were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and there are 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. Only with the arrival of Abraham on the world scene does the real mission begin to perfect the sin of Adam Harishon, of the first man. And this ties in with the next idea that I want to mention, and that's the role of eating and drinking. Now, we don't, secular people, secular mankind, humankind, doesn't really give that much spiritual credence to the acts of eating and drinking. It's something pleasurable, or it's something necessary for existence. People make a fuss of gourmet foods and stuff like that. But really, there is a higher purpose to eating and drinking. And we see that with the way God structured humanity, that he told Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, meaning don't consume that stuff. Don't consume that stuff. It's not good for you. And now, alternately, it's also possible to fix, to correct what Adam and Eve did by eating from that tree of knowledge of good and evil, by eating the right stuff, by doing the right kind of consumption, the right kind of eating and drinking. And we see this. Noah plants a vine and drinks. We have to understand what that's about. But the point is that Noah suffers a downfall, as we'll see, just as Adam and Eve suffered a downfall from the act of consumption. And subsequently, that is why it's so important, it's vital to understand the role of the Torah creating foods that are permissible and foods that are not permissible, animals that you're allowed to eat, animals you're not allowed to eat. And if you want to eat an animal, it has to be slaughtered, it has to be koshered. Food has to be kosher, right? Kasher means fit for human consumption, not just in the physical sense that it's fresh and scrumptious, but it's also spiritually permitted. It won't harm your soul. Food can have a positive effect and a negative effect, not just in the physical sense, like we know bad food can poison you, you can have food poisoning, but there's also spiritual poisoning that can happen by eating the wrong foods, right? Like the whole idea of a magic potion or magic pills, or even today we see there's things called vitamins. Vitamins can give you greater energy, greater life. And then there's toxic stuff, things that are toxic with toxicity that can be harmful and dangerous to you. So this is all on the internal, internally speaking. So spiritually, it's the same thing. So now, and there's another type of consumption, for example, the korbanot, the sacrifices, something we've mentioned. Later it will be the Kohanim, the Jewish priests, who will be the main ones to eat the sacrificial offerings, those that are not offered up to God, that is. Otherwise, God himself is, so to speak, consuming sacrifices. And on Passover, every Jew becomes a Kohen. On Passover, the Paschal Lamb, the Passover offering, was something that was eaten by every Jew. Every single Jewish man and woman and child ate the Passover offering, which was a roasted lamb. And today we have the matzah. We don't eat we don't have meat because we don't have a temple. The lamb was supposed to be offered up in the surroundings of the temple. But today all we have is the matzah and the maror, the matzah crackers and the maror, the bitter herbs. Okay, and now we'll proceed to read chapter 9 from the English. I use the Aryeh Kaplan translation, and I welcome you to open up a volume, Genesis chapter 9. Read along with me, and or you can follow with me. And it's take it in the spirit of an overview. It's always good to do an overview of a subject before you get into it. So this is an overview, and it's also an actual reading in English of the text. I don't do the Hebrew. Later I'll do some Hebrew passages, but for the most part, we do the English because this series is taking place in the English language. So here goes with chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his children. He said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. There shall be a fear and dread of you instilled in all the wild beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, in all that will walk the land, and in all the fish of the sea. I have placed them in your hands. Every moving thing that lives shall be to you as food. Like plant vegetation, I have now given you everything, but nevertheless, you may not eat flesh from a creature that is still alive. Only of the blood of your own lives will I demand an account. I will demand such an account from the hand of every wild beast. From the hand of man, even from the hand of a man's own brother, I will demand an account of every human life. He who spills human blood shall have his own blood spilled by man, by God, for God made man with his own image, right? Now be fruitful and multiply, swarm all over the earth and become populous on it. Now, here's a subject heading, the rainbow. That's from Aryeh Kaplan giving this subject heading. And then there's a subject here about the rainbow. God said to Noah and his sons with him, I myself am making a covenant with you and with your offspring after you. It will also include every living creature that is with you among the birds, the livestock, and all the beasts of the earth with you, and all who all who left the ark, including every animal on earth. I will make my covenant with you, and all life will never be cut short by the waters of a flood. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the sign that I am providing for the covenant between me, you, and every living creature that is with you. For everlasting generations, I have placed my rainbow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the rainbow will be seen among the clouds, I will then recall the covenant that exists between me, you, and every living soul in all flesh. The rainbow will be in the clouds, and I will see it to recall the eternal covenant between God and every living soul in all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have made between me and all flesh on the earth. Now, here comes an upsetting, depressing, unusual little topic. It's not so little, actually. It's an important topic. Canaan is cursed, right? Here come problems. The sons of Noah who emerged from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Yefeth. Ham was the father of Canaan in Hebrew. The three were Noah's sons, and from them the whole earth was repopulated. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank some of the wine, making himself drunk, and uncovered himself in the tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked, and he told it to his two brothers outside. Shem and Yefeth took a cloak and placed it on both their shoulders. Walking backwards, they then covered their father's nakedness. They faced away from him and did not see their father naked. Noah awoke from his wine-induced sleep, and he realized what his youngest son had done to him. He said, "Cursed is Canaan. He shall be a slave to his brothers." He then said, "Blessed be God, the Lord of Shem. Canaan shall be his slave. May God expand Yefeth, but may he dwell in the tents of Shem. Let Canaan be their slave." Noah lived 350 years after the flood. All of Noah's days were 950 years, and he died. And that makes it 29 verses. 29 verses in chapter 9, right? So you see there's a lot of unusual stuff. God blessing Noah as he came out of the ark, then the subject of the rainbow, and then this very, very complex situation with the downfall of Noah. He gets drunk, and then something happens between him and Canaan and Ham, and then Noah gives a curse to Ham and blessings to Shem and Yefeth. And Shem, Ham, and Yefeth, they are the progenitors of all mankind as we have it to our very day. So now let's move on to the next step, and that is to see what the commentary of Rashi has to say on some of the verses. As you know, I use the Rashi Commentary as the basic text. Everybody does, everybody in Torah scholarship. Rashi stands for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. He was a Jewish scholar who lived in France about 1,000 years ago, and his commentary is the essential commentary for understanding the text of the Torah as well as of the Talmud. So let's delve into that, and we'll do select Rashis, not all of them. We'll do some select Rashi commentaries and see what comes out of it. Okay. So now Rashi is going to quote a midrash on verse 2. Verse 2 says, I'll read it in Hebrew first, Uma'ara'achem v'chitchem yiyeh al kol chayat ha'aretz v'al kol of hashamayim v'chol asher tirmos ha'adama v'chol degei hayam beyetchem nitonu. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, and upon all wherewith the ground teems, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. So now Rashi stops and he tries to examine this word chitchem, dread, chitchem, dread. So how do you know what this word means? So he says it means ematchem, the terror of you. Ema b'pachad, pachad means fear. Ema means like extreme dread, like extreme fear. And how does he know this? He gets this from a verse in the book of Job, chapter 6, Tiru Chatat, you see terror, you shall see terror. Chatat, so chitchem and chatat, he says, is the word for fear. Okay, so he derives it from a word in the book of Job, chapter 6. And the Agada, there's Agada on this in meaning an Agadic explanation in the Talmud of Tractate Sabbath. So Rashi says it doesn't mean just fear, it could mean something else. It could mean Lashon Chiyut, a language of life. Shekol zman shetinok ben yomo chai ein ata tzarich leshomra min ha'achbarim. As long as an infant is alive, in other words, if there is life force in a human being, because it says, fear of you and chitchem will strike fear in the animals. So fear of you and chitchem means your life force. Just being alive scares an animal. So it says a baby can scare off a mouse just by being alive. Even a dead king who is dead needs to be watched. But as long as a person is alive, generally speaking, animals fear humans. They'll run away from a human being. The truth of the matter is, this is, if you've ever watched nature documentaries and you've read books about nature, they'll tell you that an animal will only attack you when it feels threatened. Generally speaking, it's very unusual for an animal to be a bloodthirsty predator, just to go out looking for people first. That's if they've already tasted human flesh. But generally speaking, the animal kingdom is fearful of human beings. You know, when a human approaches, an animal runs away. Birds fly away, cats and dogs run away. It's just the nature of things. So this is derived from this verse that God gave this blessing. It's not just, animals fear human beings. It wasn't always so. At one time before the flood, animals did not fear human beings. That's according to the commentaries. So God is now saying animals will fear you just by virtue of you being alive. And this I found also in here I have here Medrash Rabbah. See, I have this. This is an English translation, also put out by Sansino originally. Same people who translate the Zohar and some of the other works. They also translated the Talmud way before there was an Art Scroll translation. They were in English. There was the Sansino translation. There still is. Now we have a lot of Art Scroll stuff, if you're familiar with that. And here I'll read to you. It says that, and the fear of you and the dread of you, chitchem, shall be upon every beast of the earth. So that's Genesis chapter 9, verse 2. And let me read to you what the Midrash says. Now, this is the real Midrash. This is not the book Midrash says. This is the real Midrash Rabbah, a translation into English. Fear and dread returned, but dominion did not return. So no, man does not rule over the beasts, but the beasts have a fear and dread of man. So when did it return? When did dominion return? In the days of Solomon, as it's written, for he had dominion over all the region. In the book of Kings, Kings 1, Melachim Aleph, chapter 5, verse 4, there's a verse there that says, for he had dominion over all the region. In the times of King Solomon, man reached such a high level in the persona of King Solomon, who was one of the holiest Jewish king, that the animals feared. The animals feared man, and man had dominion over the entire animal kingdom. Furthermore, it was taught, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, for a live infant 1 day old, the Sabbath is desecrated. Meaning, as long as an infant is alive, then we desecrate the Sabbath. There's a concept called pikuach nefesh doiches haShabbos. In order to save a life, we are allowed to desecrate the Shabbos. You know, even though there are laws and rules about observing the Shabbat, but if it's a case of having to save a life, something medical needs to be done to save a life, then we go ahead and we desecrate the Shabbos, because the Torah says, v'chai bahem, you should live by them, and you shouldn't die because of the commandments. So that's how we know that it's allowed. That an emergency is allowed to push aside the Sabbath. For a live infant, let's call pikuach nefesh doiches Shabbos. For a live infant 1 day old, the Sabbath is desecrated. But for David, king of Israel, dead. Let's say King David, the greatest king of Israel, or one of the greatest, is lying there. He's dead. The Sabbath may not be desecrated. No. So once he's dead, let's say you need to do something to take care of his body, you're not allowed to do it on the Sabbath because he's dead. The life force has exited the body. And thus too did Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar say. And that's the Rashi that's quoted here, and that it's also quoted in the Talmud. An infant 1 day old alive need not be guarded from mice or serpents to prevent them picking out his eyes. You don't have to worry. Usually a mouse or a snake will not come to attack an infant even 1 day old. In other words, this is a baby 1 day old that can't even defend himself. A lion sees him and flees. A lion sees a human being and runs away. Doesn't want to have anything to do. You're going to threaten the lion? Sure, the lion will attack. But if the lion just is like walking by and sees a human form there, generally speaking, it'll run away. A serpent sees him and flees. Yet Og, the king of Bashan, he was a king, a giant who was one of the few people left from before the flood. He survived by being on Noah's Ark. That's a whole other story. Yet Og, king of Bashan, dead, must be guarded, because a dead body becomes prey for animals. For as long as a man is alive, his fear lies upon the lower creatures. When he dies, his fear is removed from the lower creatures. Thus it is written, and the fear of you and the life of you, and the fear of you and the life of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. Right? So that's a nice little quote from the Midrash. And I just wanted to show that to you because it's what Rashi says here is an agada from Tractate Shabbat. Agada lashon chiyut shekol zman shetinok ben yom achai, that as long as a baby is 1 day old, you don't ein ata tzarich l'shomra min ha'achbarim. You don't have to guard it from the mice. And here he mentions Og Melech HaBashan made, but if Og Melech HaBashan dies, tzarich Og, the king of Bashan, dies. In other words, he's lying there as a corpse. Tzarich l'shomra min ha'achbarim. You have to guard him from mice. Mice will nibble away at a corpse, but not at a living body. We're talking about normal mice. We're not talking about crazy mice. We're not talking about starving mice. Shenemar umorachem vechitchem yiem emasay yiem orachem al hachayos kozman shatem chayim. When will your fear be upon all the animals? As long as you're all alive. Okay, so we went into detail on the word chitchem, the dread of you. It could mean the dread of you or the life of you. Okay, let's look a little further. Now, verse 4. Oh, no. I want to see something before that. Verse 3. Yes, this is important. Kol remes asher hu chai lachem yiyeh la'achla. Every moving thing that lives shall be for you for food. Keyerek esev natati lachem et kol. God is now permitting the eating of living creatures. Until the flood, humanity were vegetarians. From the time of the flood, here we see God now gives mankind, starting from the times of Noah, the permission to eat living creatures. Right? So let's see what Rashi says about that. Lachem yiyeh la'achla. Shalar hisheti la'adam harishan basar ela yerek esev. Because I only permitted, in other words, Rashi is answering the question, why does it say, for you it will be for food? If it's food for you, who wasn't it food for? Well, Rashi answers that question by saying it wasn't food for Adam. I only permitted Adam to eat the green herbs, the green grasses, and fruits and things. Velachem, and for you, keyerek esev hivkarti la'adam keshevkarti la'adam arishon. Just like I permitted Adam to eat the grasses and the herbs and the fruits, so I'm giving to you I'm giving to you the living animals to eat as well now. And they say it's in one of the commentaries, a reward for taking care of the animals in the ark. That's one reason. Now, one thing, moving on, ach basar benafsho damo lo tachelu. The flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood. The blood contains the nefesh. Blood is a living force. Blood has in it the nefesh. It's the living, the spiritual living force within a man. Not the soul. The soul is even higher spiritually, but the blood contains in it the nefesh, the life force. So he forbid them. So let's just read it again. Ach basar benafsho. Only flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. In other words, don't eat the blood which contains the nefesh of the flesh. So here we see he forbade them to eat. Asa lahem, what's flesh with the nefesh still in it? Living flesh. What's living flesh? It's still alive, that it's connected to the animal, and it's called Ever min achai, a living limb. So you should not snap off the limb of a living creature whilst it's still alive and eat it. Klomar, kolzman shenafshe bo, that is to say, as long as its nefesh is still in it, lo tachlu habasar. So that's an important commandment, and we see it is one of the commandments of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Remember, I told you there were 7 commandments: not to worship idols, not to commit sexual immorality, not to murder, and now we see Eivir Min HaChai, not to eat the limb of a living animal, not to curse God, right? Not to steal, and to have courts of law. Those are the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the 7 commandments of the sons of Noah, called the Noahide laws. Okay, now going on here, the verses say, "Va'ach edimchem lenafshotechem edrosh." And surely your blood of your lives will I require. Miyad kol chaya edrosh umiyad ha'adam. What is all this? And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, even at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man, who sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. So what is going on here? This is verse number 5 and 6. A lot of instructions here about not shedding the blood of man. So what are the details? What is going on here? So Rashi will explain. Va'af et dimchem, af al pi shehitalti lachem netilas neshama v'behema. Even though I permitted you to take the life of an animal, et dimchem edrosh, your blood I will demand, mehashafech dam atzma, from the one who sheds his own blood. So let's say somebody decides to kill themselves, right? You're allowed to kill an animal. So therefore, does it mean I'm allowed to kill myself? No, I will demand your blood. I will demand a punishment if you do such a thing. So that's what that's saying. That's the va'ach et dimchem, and surely your blood, dimchem, your blood. What's your blood? If you commit suicide, if you shed your own blood, if you shoot yourself, if you slit your wrists, if you do something dangerous to yourself, I'll have your head. I'll demand your blood. Lenafshotechem, of your lives. What does it mean? I will va'achet dimchem lenafshotechem. I will demand the blood of your nefesh. So he says this includes af hachornek atzma, af al pi shelo yotza mimenu dam. Meaning, you see, the rabbis think of everything. What about a person who hangs himself? There's no blood there. So Rashi says that's the implication from I will demand your nefesh, even if there is no blood, but you took your own life by hanging, say, strangulation. So it says here, even someone who strangles himself, who hangs himself, even though blood did not come out, there was no blood in the hanging, nevertheless, I will demand an accounting from that person. So it's setting up the laws here of murder. Not only you're not allowed to murder other people, but you're not allowed to murder yourself. Miyad kol chai, at the hand of every beast. So what does it throw in here, the subject of, from the hand of every beast, I'll demand an accounting. Lefi shechatu dar hamabel v'hufkuru lemachal chayas ra'os. Because the generation of the flood sinned, they were cast off as food to the wild animals, lishlot bahem. The wild animals, the wild beasts, ruled over man before the flood because man had become evil and corrupt. Shenemar nimshal kabehemes nidbu. He ruled over them by wild beasts. Lahazir alehem et hachayot. So now this is to warn the animals. This is an instruction, so to speak. God is issuing a decree that will affect nature, mother nature, father nature, mother-in-law nature, father-in-law nature, however you want to call nature, that it says miyad kol chaya, from every animal at the hand of every beast. This is to warn the beasts themselves not to kill human beings. So it's a terrible, terrible thing for a person to be killed by an animal, right? That we know. Umiyad ha'adam. And then the verse continues, Umiyad ha'adam. It says, I will, and surely your blood of your lives, this is Genesis chapter 9, verse 5. Verse 5. And surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man. Umiyad ha'adam. So what's that? Miyad ha'adam, from the hand of man. Miyad ha'hareg b'mezid. Ve'ein edim. I will demand an accounting from a person who kills deliberately, sneakily, and there are no witnesses. Somebody who plans to murder someone without witnesses. In secret, you want to go and kill someone, you want to murder someone. Ani edrosh. I will demand from him. I will require his life. I will take his life. So don't think you'll get away with murder, as they say, as the expression goes. You're not going to get away with murder. God is going to require you, and he will take your life. Somehow God will find a way to have an accounting with you. So that's derived from the verse, Umiyad ha'adam, just a plain person without any witnesses. And then there's another, and then the verse goes on to say, Miyad ish achiv, and at the hand of every man's brother. So who is that talking about? Miyad shehu ohev lo ka'ach. This is a case of where someone loves another person like a brother, but unfortunately they go ahead and murder them by accident. V'harag shogeg. They accidentally killed. I don't know, you were two guys love each other, the best of pals, and one of them's playing around with a revolver or a pistol, and a shot goes off, and a bullet flies through the head of your best friend. Oops. You just killed somebody by accident, right? Or you were both on a veranda somewhere, or you're on top of a mountain, and you just nudged an elbow, and oops, there goes your friend flying down into the ravine and the crevice. So God says, in such a case, now the person, it's not intentional murder, it's accidental. It's not even murder. It's not even manslaughter. That's an accident. But God demands an accounting. Ani adrash im lo yigle vivakesh alavana lemachel. I will ask an accounting from that person if they will not go into exile. In the times of the children of Israel living in Israel, an accidental murderer had to go into exile, into a city of exile, and he had to ask for forgiveness. He had to beg for mercy. So you have to beg for mercy, ask God for forgiveness, ask the family for forgiveness, and go into exile in a city of exile. Because he says here, Rashi, She'af hashageg tzarich kapara. Even a mistaken murderer needs atonement. Ve'im ein eiden lechayva legalos, v'hu ein anichna. And if there are no witnesses to send him into exile, and he does not subject himself to exile, Hakadosh Baruch Hu daresh mimenu. The Holy One, blessed be He, God Himself, will demand from him, as our rabbis learned in the tractate of Makot. Makot is one of the tractates of the Talmud, deals with accidental happenings. So, and then the verse continues to say, Drosh et nefesh adam, I will require the life of man. Anyhow, concerning the this case of an accidental killing, it says ve'elahim ina leyado, ve'elahim ina leyado, that God will let it come into his hand. which means, I don't know if that's a verse or not, but it means Hakadosh Baruch Hu is mazmin lepadak echad. God will cause it to be that this person will go into an inn or into some motel, and the guy who killed deliberately and the guy who didn't kill deliberately will meet up. And the guy who didn't kill deliberately, he's be climbing down a ladder, and it'll fall on top of the guy who killed deliberately with no witnesses. So and then that guy will have to go into exile again. So the guy who killed deliberately is killed by a guy's another accident of the other guy. So the point being, God will orchestrate events to exact punishment. And this is what they say, by the way, about the sacrifices and about the capital punishments. One shouldn't think that they don't get done and God doesn't, there are no more punishments in the world. Instead of the capital punishments being done by Sanhedrin, because we don't have, for the last 2,000 years, Jews have not practiced capital punishment. We're very advanced in that way. I mean it seriously. But a person shouldn't think, oh, well, therefore I can just become a hitman, No. God will take vengeance and the punishment will be done, as the expression goes, thy will be done. God's will be done in various other ways, through accidents, through wars, through catastrophes, through illnesses. You never know, why God is bringing a catastrophe or an illness or a pandemic to the world. What that's a punishment for, what people have induced God to do. Okay, let's move on. And it says in verse 6, Shafech dam ha'adam be'adam damo yishafech. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. So it means it's a commandment to execute someone who is a murderer. Ba'adam dama yishafech, Rashi says, by man shall his blood be shed. Im yesh edim. This is only if there are witnesses for capital punishments and for all punishments in the Torah. You need two kosher witnesses and who issued a warning to the person, or who definitely saw it happen. So hamituhu atem, you then execute the murderer. Lama ki betzelem. Why? And that's why the verse says, Ki betzelem Elokim asa et hadam. For in the image of God he made man. Why do we go ahead and execute a man? Do you execute someone when they slaughter a chicken, or they shoot a deer, or they squish an ant? Do you have capital punishment for that? Obviously not. But when you murder another human being, there is capital punishment. Why? So that ties in with the Tzelem Elokim, because a human being has in him an image of God. It's like you're murdering God, so to speak, because inside of a human being is a spark of God. Sometimes it's more than a spark. It's the life force. That's the godliness inside of a man, of a woman, of a human being that you are destroying. And animals do not have that. Animals have a life force, but it's not of the level of a human soul and of a human being's life that is connected much more to the divine. Of course, everything is an extension of God and of the divine, but man is the highest form. And it's called, the Torah gives it a name. It's called Tzelem Elokim, the image of God. The image of God, right? Tzelem means an image. It's strangely enough in Hebrew, it also means a cross. Tzelem could mean a cross because it's an image. It's a religious image. But of course, God forbid, in Judaism, we don't believe in the cross, even though sometimes that word is used for the cross. We believe that it's something spiritual inside of a human being, the life force, the spiritual element that keeps a human being alive, that keeps you breathing. Let's move on. And then in verse 7 it says, "V'atem pru urevu shirtzu ba'aretz urevu va," and you be fruitful and multiply, swarm the earth and multiply therein. So what is v'atem pru urevu lefi pshuta harishon livracha v'chan letzivui? So they were already told in verse in a prior verse. Let me find it. Yes, verse 1, it says, when they came out of the ark, Vayevarech Elohim et Noach ve'et banav vayomer lahem pru urevu umilu et haaretz. God already said in verse 1, chapter 9, verse 1, be fruitful and multiply and fill up the earth. So now why is it repeating that same blessing? In verse 7, chapter 9, verse 7, it says, now, and you be fruitful and multiply, fill up the earth. So Rashi explains, Lefi pshuto harishon libracha ve'kan letzivui, based on a Talmudic teaching in the tractate Ktubot, Ksubis. The first prurevu was a blessing. I'm blessing you, God says. And this, ve'kan letzivui, and here it's a command. So so we see there's a difference between a command and a blessing. Okay, let's go on to the subject of the rainbow. V'ani hineni maskim ani imach sha'anoch do'eg la'asok bepir v'rivya. So Noah was worried about having children because he saw what happened during the flood. So God now is saying to him, don't worry, I'm going to make a sign of a covenant with you, the rainbow. Why the rainbow? Because the rainbow is shaped like we say bow, right? A bow. We say rainbow. It's shaped like a bow, and the idea is that God had punished the earth, so to speak, with a bow, with a kind of weapon of war, right? It's an instrument of destruction. So now God is turning it around, the rainbow, and making the instrument of destruction, showing that no longer will the rainfall be an instrument of destruction. No more will floods be an instrument of destruction of the world. God will no longer destroy the world through water, but instead he's going to keep a promise. And whenever there'll be a rainbow, it's a sign of a covenant between God and humanity, that he's remembering not to destroy mankind ever again through a flood. And so that reassured Noah. And therefore he wanted to have more children. Interestingly, it becomes a commandment. I have here my Art Scroll Siddur. It's a well-used version, one of the earliest versions. I bought this when it first came out in 1984, August 1984, first impression. First edition, first impression, August 1984. My own, I use it for my own prayers. And there is actually a blessing that we make. When you see a rainbow, you're supposed to make the blessing, and it goes as follows. I'm going to read it in the full Hebrew, including God's names, for educational purposes. It says here, upon seeing a rainbow in the sky, you say as follows: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam zocher habrit v'ne'eman bivrito v'kayam b'ma'amaroi. The translation of that is, blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who remembers the covenant, is trustworthy in his covenant, and fulfills his word. That's because God made a covenant with Noah, and by extension, all mankind. So we actually have, to this very day, a blessing that we make when you see a rainbow. You'll find it usually in an Orthodox Siddur with the blessings. After the morning prayers, there's usually a list of all the different kinds of blessings, like upon seeing lightning, thunder, the various things in nature. Here even it says, upon seeing exceptionally beautiful people, trees or fields, exceptionally strange-looking people or animals, upon seeing an outstanding Torah scholar, upon seeing an outstanding secular scholar. There are blessings for all these things. But that is the blessing that I read to you over seeing the rainbow. Now I'd like to go on to the subject of what happened when Noah came out of the ark. He planted a vine. They say he brought with him in the ark, he brought with him a vine, and also from a fig tree, some branches to plant. And this got him into trouble because when he planted the vine, he got drunk from the wine, and then it led to a whole family tragedy, which we'll take a look at now. Okay. Chapter 9, verse 18. Vayiyu bnei Noach hayotzim min hateva Shem v'Cham v'Yefeth. And the sons of Noah that came out of the ark were Shem, Cham, and Yefeth. V'Cham hu avi Canaan. And Cham is the father of Canaan. So there's a question of why it has to mention that Cham is the father of Canaan. What's that got to do with anything? It doesn't mention the sons of the others. It just says that Cham is the father of Canaan. So it means Canaan is a grandson of Noah. What's that got to do with anything? So that's Rashi's question. Lama hutzot lamar kan? Why does it have to be mentioned here that that Cham is the father of Canaan? Why? Because the parsha, lefi parsha asuka uva b'shikrusu shel Noach. Because now the parsha, the Torah is going to be discussing the drunkenness of Noah. Shekilkel b'Cham, that Cham himself had a hand in the consequences of it. V'al yadon et kalkel Canaan, and then Canaan got messed up. Cham got involved with Noah's nakedness somehow. We'll see how, and that in turn dragged in his son Canaan. We'll see how. And we don't know yet. Till this point, we didn't know yet that Canaan, Rashi says, is the son of Cham. So the Torah is informing us. Okay, now verse 20. It says, "Vayachel Noach," and Noah, the husbandman, began. Vayachel began. Here it says began. Okay, in this translation. But Rashi says, Vayachel asa asma chulin. The word chulin means secular. This kodesh and chol, holy and secular, holy and profane. So what Noah did, he profaned himself. He profaned himself. The opposite of the opposite of sanctifying himself. He profaned himself. How? Because he should have been busy with some other kind of planting or occupation. Why get busy with the vine of all things, and making wine? He went down the wrong path. So it says also, Vayachal Noach ish ha'adama. He's called an ish ha'adama, man of the earth, man of Adam, literally, but man of the earth. Adonai ha'adamah. This denotes that he was the master of the earth. He was master of the earth. Vayita karem, keshanichnas leteva hichnis ima zemeres v'yichure ta'enim. He planted a vineyard. So what's the vineyard? How does he come to plant a vineyard? It says that when he entered the ark, he brought with him grapevines and shoots for the preservation of fig. Those two things. And that, by the way, is what they say, that the original fruit on the tree of knowledge of good and evil was either grapes or the fig. So those were you could say the forbidden fruits that Adam had eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and now somehow Noah saw fit to bring the shoots from those trees onto the ark with him. Vayitgal. So verse 20. So what did that lead to? Vayesht, and he drank. Min hayayin. So he drank from the wine of the wine of the vine. Vayishkar, he became a sheker, became drunk. Vayitgal, and he was uncovered. He uncovered himself. He started maybe he had a hot flash. I don't know what happened to him. He uncovered himself, just wanted to chill out. Betoch ahala, within his tent. So vayitgal, lashon, vayitpael, he did it to himself. He uncovered himself. Ahala, ktiv, ahala. Remez, so it says ahala is going to be a hint to the, Rashi goes into this description here of the 10 lost tribes that they called Shamron, and they also called Ahala, and that they were exiled because of wine. There was a lot of drunkenness, and that they threw around their cups as drunkards. A description from the prophet Amos, chapter 6. Amos, chapter 6. So Rashi gets into something a little esoteric here, that this is a hint to the eventual demise of the 10 tribes that will also be due to the abuse of alcohol. And then what happened? Verse 22, Vayar Cham avi Canaan. So Cham, the father of Canaan, again, the father of Canaan, at Erev, he saw the nakedness of his father. What does it mean he saw the nakedness of his father? Vayaged lishnei echav bachutz. And he told about the nakedness of his father to his two brothers who were standing on the outside. So what is going on here? Vayar Cham avi Canaan. What did he see? Yesh me rabatenu amrim Canaan ra'a vehigid la'aviv. Canaan saw and told his father, L'chach huskar al hadavar v'niskalkel. He told his father. He was disrespectful. He told him, hey, you're naked, He told him off. And that was being disrespectful as a son, so he was cursed. Others say, Vayar Cham avi Canaan at Ervat Aviv. He saw the Ervat Aviv. Not only did Vayar Cham, not only did he see and speak out, but there's even more here in the verse. It says, he saw the nakedness. Now, if the previous verse already told us, Vayitgal, that Noah had uncovered himself, right? Implying it was pretty bad. I mean, it wasn't like he just loosened his tie. It meant something more meaningful. So if Noah had undressed himself, and then Cham saw this, so now what does that he saw the nakedness? Obviously, he was already in a state of undress, right? He saw his nakedness. So Rashi goes into this. That's based on the sages in the Gemara Sanhedrin and Midrashic sources. Yesh Amrim Sarsa. Very brief, but very powerful and very horrible. Yesh Omrim Sarso. Some say he castrated him, made him impotent. Lesares means to cut, to make impotent. V'yesh Omrim Reva'ah. And some say he had homosexual sex with him, that he raped him, that Ham is really a disgusting character. We're going to see. That's why Noah's going to curse him pretty badly. So there's three options of what happened. One, that he just saw him naked, and that he did see him naked, obviously. Then that he castrated Noah, Ham castrated Noah. And the other option is that Ham raped Noah in a homosexual way, which was pretty disgusting. So now the two other brothers, what they do, verse 23, this is chapter 9, verse 23, Vayikach Shem Yefeth, Shem and Yefeth et hasimcha, they took a garment and laid it on their shoulders, they put it on their shoulders, and they walked backwards, and they covered their father. Vayikach Shem Yefeth, Rashi says, Ein ti vayikhu. So Rashi is standing here, is pinpointing the language. Vayikach, it doesn't say vayikhu, and they took, plural. It says it in the singular, and he took. Why does it say, and he took Shem and Yefeth? If it's saying Shem and Yefeth doing it together, it should say they took, not he took. So why does the Torah say, and he took? So Rashi then points out, Engsi vayikhu, it doesn't say they took, el vayikach, that he took, limed al Shem. So it tells you that one of them was more proactive, and that was Shem. Limud al Shem. It teaches you about Shem. Shenit amitz b'mitzvah. Yotem Yefet. That he was more. He did the mitzvah with more alacrity. He was more. He was quicker than Yefet. Therefore, eventually, he gets a blessing that his descendants, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, get the mitzvah of tzitzit, because it's a covering. It's something that's attached to the covering of clothing, right? You put tzitzit on your clothing. V'Yefet zacha lekvura levanav, and then Yefet merits burial for his sons. Eten legog mekom sham kever. Eventually, in the war of Gog and Magog, getting also very esoteric, in the war of Armageddon, eventually the descendants of Yefet will be defeated, and their corpses and bodies will pile up, but they will be buried. They receive an honorable burial. The Cham Shabizes Aviv, and Cham who disgraced his father. So then there's a verse in Isaiah that the king of Assyria will one day, this is from Isaiah chapter 20, verse 4, that eventually it says that the king of Assyria, Ashur, will take the prisoners of Egypt and Cush. Those are the descendants of Ham, Egypt and Cush, Mitzrayim and Cush, and he will take them young and old, naked, and with their buttocks showing into exile. And furthermore, he says, Arar Canaan, cursed will be Canaan, because Noah wanted to have more children. And since Ham made it impossible for Noah to have more children, therefore Noah cursed Ham's descendants, like, you made it impossible for me to have descendants, so I'm now going to curse your descendant, Canaan, that he should become a slave. And that's what chapter 9, verse 25 says. Noah said, Arur Canaan, cursed be Canaan, Eved Avadim Yela Echav. He will be a servant to his brothers. So he's cursed with slavery. And then Vayomer Baruch Adonai Elahei Shem, and then he blesses Shem, that Shem should be blessed by God. V'hi Canaan Eved Lama, and Canaan should be his slave. Yafta Lahim LeYefeth, the beauty of Yefeth goes to him, to Yefeth. It's the word beauty, of expansion, of growth, of mindfulness, of philosophy, of art, of literature, of beauty, of empire. That's Yefeth. That's the interpretation that's given. And he should dwell in the tents of Shem. It should be a beautification for Shem. I know all these things need explanation, but we will one day hopefully go more in detail. And then again it repeats it, V'hiknan Eved Lama, even when in the future everybody will have it better, Canaan will still remain a slave to to his brothers, to Shem and Yefeth. And then Noah dies. I just want to touch on a point with you. Again, from the Zohar, it says here that it explains the drunkenness. This is chapter 9, verse 20. Let me read it to you. And Noah the husbandman began and planted a vineyard. Rabbi Judah and Rabbi Yossi differed as to the origin of this vine. One said it came from the Garden of Eden. So some say the vine came from the Garden of Eden, and Noah now planted it here. The other said it had been on the earth before the flood, and Noah had plucked it and now replanted it. And so, okay. On the same day it blossomed, it ripened, and brought forth grapes. Noah then pressed out from them wine, drank it, and became drunken. Reb Shimon said, there is a mystical, listen to this, there is a mystical allusion in this verse. When Noah began to probe into the sin of Adam, not for the purpose of practicing it, but in order to understand it, and so warn the world against it, he pressed grapes in order to make researches into that vineyard. But when he reached that point, he was drunken and uncovered. He lost his mental balance and uncovered the breach of the world, which hitherto had been closed up. So according to the Zohar, this is not just a physical drunkenness, because it doesn't really make sense. I mean, Noah after all he'd been through, he just suddenly becomes a drunkard, an alcoholic, and loses himself so drastically. It is difficult. And this Zohar comes to answer that question. Like, how could Noah descend to such a depth? Well, the thing is, he wasn't just merely drunken in the drunken sense. No, he was actually trying to probe, because he was like the new Adam, the new man on earth. And he was trying to figure out a deep philosophical, existential, spiritual question. What happened to the first man that there was such a downfall? And he started researching it and getting into it. And I guess, he went into an alternate state of mind. Maybe he drank the wine. It's like he's implying that he drank the wine, or he not even necessarily drank wine, but he got so high and he went so deep into trying to understand the sin of Adam and Eve and what really went on over there, that his mind tripped over. He lost his balance. And it can happen, by the way. People can get into such a state of search and trying to dig so deep. Maybe they'll take drugs. I'm not even saying they will take drugs, but some people just lose their balance. Noah went so far that he lost his balance of. He lost his balance of mind, and he tripped, and he even unsealed something that was plugged. He unplugged something that was already put away on the shelf, so to speak, and he brought it back into the earth, and sin came back into the earth. So this is the sin of Noah, as the Zohar explains it. And similarly, there's going to be Nadav and Avihu later in the Torah, two sons of Aaron are also going to die because they offered up a strange fire. Some say they got drunk. And again, the Zohar says it has to do with, it has to do with them delving into esoteric matters that flip their mind. And they lost themselves. And you know how it is when people lose themselves, when they flip their minds, they rip their clothes off, they get undressed, things happen to them. So Cham came along and castrated him, as the Zohar says, removing from this, as explained, was observed by Cham, the father of Canaan, and Canaan seized the opportunity to work his will by removing from that righteous man the mystical symbol of the covenant. So the Zohar says Canaan did it. For this, according to the tradition, is what he did. So castrating Noah, because Noah was getting to be too Adam-like, maybe. He was flying high. He was becoming too angelic. He was a danger. It's a mystery. Okay, let's leave it at that. The mystery of what Cham and or Canaan did to Noah and why they did it, I will leave you with food for thought. It's a tough one. I'll just bring in one last thing from the Medrash. Medrash says, Noah had taken vine branches into the ark, and he decided to begin the recultivation of the soil by planting a vineyard. He erred in this choice, as he should first have planted wheat or some other grain vital for the survival of humanity. This is from Bereshis Rabbah. This is a straight Medrash, Bereshis Rabbah. Okay, and now, so that's that. Now there's going to be a little section here, Medrash. I got a Mem Daled Ayin Gim, Mem Daled Aleph Gimel, Mem Daled Medrash Agada, also Midrashic. Listen to this story. As Noah was about to plant the vine, Satan appeared. Satan is the force of evil, the serpent, the dark side, Darth Vader, however you want to understand it. Satan means accuser. The word Satan in Hebrew means the accuser, right? The angel of death. So he appeared. Do you want me to become a partner with you in making this vine grow, asked Satan. Yes, replied Noah. Satan left and returned with a little lamb in his arm. He slaughtered it, holding it over the vine. He came back a second time with a lion. He killed it and saturated the vine with its blood. Then Satan brought a monkey, slaughtered it, and poured its blood over the vine. Finally, he came with a pig and killed it, staining the earth under the vine with its blood. As a result, excessive drinking leads to satanic results. If a man partakes of 1 cup of wine, he becomes like a lamb, docile and peaceful. If he drinks 2 cups of wine, he becomes like a lion, boastful of all the great things he believes he will accomplish. After 3 cups of wine, he dances like a monkey. After 4 cups of wine, he vomits and rolls in the mud like a pig. So there's a great moral lesson there. So you see that the Torah and the great sages, they already knew about Alcoholics Anonymous and that it's no good to drink. I once heard a lecture from a person who's very familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said, once you've become a pickle, you can never return to being a cucumber again. Once a person picks up drinking, and becomes an alcoholic, they become then prisoners to the alcohol, and they should avoid it. And this little midrash shows you that it's basically satanic. When a person drinks, they become literally possessed by a demon, it seems, and they're not in their right frame of mind. So that's pretty much it. One little point here, that Noah refrained from cursing Ham himself, very important, and cursed only Ham's son. Why? Since Hashem had already blessed Noah and his sons. Once Ham possessed Hashem's blessing, the curse of a human being would not be effective. So there was no point in cursing Ham, because God had already blessed everyone who went into the ark and who came out, and he told them to be fruitful and multiply, and so on and so forth. So therefore he cursed Ham's descendant, who is Canaan. So I thank you for your attention. Please, God, we will continue. If you need to reach me, my email is rudomin@jpi.org or rudomin@att.net. Thank you so much.